this session, and I'm going to start sharing my screen with you. So you have the two texts out for today. The first text that you received was, do you want mustard on your octopus? Now these two texts have been paired together. They are both nonfiction texts. What does that mean we need to do for our thinking work? What do we need to add, Eliana, to our thinking work?
We need to add that one, it's a paired passage, and two, that they're both nonfiction texts.
Right, so if it's a paired passage, what thinking work do I have to do?
It will be what the author mostly teaches and the point of view that the author has.
But my question was, if it's a paired passage, what added thinking work do I have to do? Cavalier. Cavalier, what do I need to add to my thinking work when I have a paired passage? Cavalier, I don't know that you're hearing me. Javen, what do I need to do to add to my thinking work when I have a paired passage?
Wait, when you have a paired pass.
Check your focus. Simon, go ahead. What do we need to think about when we have a paired passage?
We need to think about what's similar about the two texts.
Right, why have they been paired together? What is similar about the two texts? And off the top of your head, we have two texts that are both about what? What was the common thread?
The common thread was about baseball.
Yeah, both of them were about baseball. The first text, however, was about how baseball is played in Japan versus the United States. That both of these countries play baseball. They play the same game, but they have some differences about them. So let's go through this first text. I'm going to call on people to share out the big ideas that we learned from each of those paragraphs as we go. Do you want mustard on your octopus? Baseball is a favorite game of sports fans in both Japan and the United States. It's played almost exactly the same in both countries. However, there are some differences. For example, Japanese fields are smaller than American fields. Also, most Japanese fields are dirt, while American fields are usually real or artificial grass. Now, before I call on people, I want you to make note of a few different things. Notice how I annotated this first paragraph. I wrote B-ball for baseball, same sport in J for Japan and AM for America. And then I wrote some differences on the side. As I moved forward then, each of my annotations is pulling out one major difference or a major similarity I learned within the paragraph. This whole text is actually, it is structured in what way? What do we call the structure of this particular text? What is this text structure? Rachel?
Compare and contrast.
Right. How do you know, what evidence do we have that it's a compare and contrast structure?
We know that this is a compare and contrast structure because they are naming the similarities and the differences about the two sports, about baseball in the two different countries.
Yeah, absolutely. So once we finish reading the text, what you're going to find is, notice how I did my main idea jot here. I got my main idea statement, and I wrote that the main idea is the similarities and differences of how baseball is played in the US versus Japan. And then down below, I've got 2 bullet points. Now, I added together the similarities as a bullet point and the differences as a separate bullet point. So read my first bullet point for me. Jacob, go ahead.
Baseball, some games both have
Same game.
Same game, both have traditional snacks and what? I can't see. Oh, and is that cheese?
Cheers.
Cheers for teams.
Okay. And then what are the differences that I collected together then? Isabella, go ahead.
Some differences in the first paragraph are that
on my main idea jot, Chip, stay focused with me, please. Chris, on my main idea jot, what are the differences I pulled down in my main idea jot?
In your main idea jot, one difference is same game, both have traditional snacks.
Nope, pause.
and-
Ladies and gentlemen, check your focus. I've found several people who are not paying attention with me. I said down at the bottom, we're looking at my main idea jot. I read to you my author mostly teaching statement. I said that I organized it below with 2 bullet points. The 2 bullet points, the first is the similarities, the second is the differences. Stay with me. When I call on you, you gotta be ready. All right, Mercy, what are the differences between baseball in Japan and the United States?
Includes no ties in USA, octopus as a snack in Japan, and no booing players as well.
Yeah, so Japan, the big idea for Japan was that both have traditional snacks, both have cheers for their team, both play the same game. However, the differences that were the major differences is that in the United States, they'll never end in a tie. And that in Japan, they have octopus as a snack. That's where we get that connection to the title. Do you want mustard on your octopus? And no booing players there. So I think that the point of view is that despite their differences, both ways of playing this popular sport are still fun pastimes for the people who enjoy it. So then moving forward into the second text. The second text, as Simon noted for us earlier, was all about baseball as well. How was this text different than the first text? What was different about this text from the first? Julian?
What's different about this text from the first is that this text isn't showing differences between two countries and how they play baseball. It's showing like the birth of baseball
Yeah.
and how it's grown ever since.
Absolutely, great. So then what is the structure of this text, Scarlett?
The structure of this text is chronological order.
Yeah, it's in chronological order. Give me some evidence to support that.
Because it's talking about in this second paragraph about the first pitch,
Yeah,
and then in the second to last paragraph is talking about Babe Ruth and how he was a baseball player in 1920.
yeah. Notice some of my annotations on the left. I'm trying to zoom in so you can see a little bit closer. All of my annotations include dates in order. So that tells me very quickly, that this is a chronological order text. So the big idea that I learned about the history of baseball is down here below. I'm going to zoom into it on this screen. I wrote for my author mostly teaching statement that it was about the history of baseball from its beginning to some of the most significant moments in its history. So then down below, I've got these bullet points that kind of capture some of those big moments in its history. So first, from 1839 to 1846, I grouped all those things together and said that it's baseball gets its start. In 1876 to 1903, I said that the World Series and leagues begin. So do you see how I'm pulling together groups of years instead of listing out individual years? I'm synthesizing the information. 1919, I wrote about Babe Ruth becomes significant figure. He's traded to the Yankees and curses the Red Sox. And then Jackie Robinson in 1947 becomes a symbol as the first person of color to be drafted into the major leagues. So the point of view here is, despite changing significantly throughout the years, baseball has remained one of America's greatest pastimes. There's a connection here between this point of view and the first text point of view that I noticed. That despite there are different ways, there's this whole idea of it being a really fun pastime or a favorite pastime for Americans and people who enjoy the sport. Okay, so now that we've finished reading both of these texts and we understand the big ideas from both of them and their connection, let's move on to the page that has our extended response prompt. First things first, with an extended response, we want to read the actual prompt, not just the bullet points. So Isaiah, read the prompt for us, please.
How do the authors of Do You Want Mustard on Your Octopus and The History of Baseball structure their ideas? Why did the authors choose these structures to convey their ideas?
We have 2 questions in that prompt. The first question is what? What's the first question? Hi, Josh.
So, the first question that they ask is, how are the two texts different and how are they structured?
Right. Describe how the author structured their ideas in the text. So text number 1, Alina, what is the structure of text number 1?
The structure of text number 1 is compare and contrast.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the structure of number 2, Ariel?
Explain why the authors choose the structures.
Ariel, the question I asked is the structure of number 2, text 2.
The structure of text 2 is chronological order.
Great. So let's jot that down as our draft idea. So I wrote here, T1 equals compare contrast, C/C, and then text number 2 equals chronological order. This is my draft idea, so I can just abbreviate things. Frank, make sure you've got this down.
Thanks for adding Eliana. Next getting to it, Angel.
The second question is to explain why the authors chose these structures to convey their ideas. So let's think. Why did the author of the first text decide to structure in compare and contrast form? Rachel-Elyse.
The author in the first text, the author uses similarity and differences, and in the second text, he uses chronological order.
Rachel-Elyse, that wasn't my question. It wasn't what did they do, it was why did they do it? Why in the first text is it compare and contrast? Joshua.
I think that in the first text is compare and contrast because they're trying to show the similarities and differences between baseball in Japan and baseball in America.
Great, because their purpose was to show the similarities and differences. Great. And then in the second text, why chronological order, Anthony?
Chronological order is the structure for the second text because it described how baseball first started and how it came to be the sport that is well known everywhere today.
Great. So let's draft those ideas down below. I wrote down for text 1 to show similarities and differences of baseball in Japan and America, just like JK just said for us. And then text number 2, I wrote to convey the history and significant moments. And people, I wrote /people. All right, so now that we've drafted ideas, we know where we're going. What's our next step? We've drafted ideas. Now what do we need to do next, Michael?
I think we might have to do the planning page.
Right, which means that we need to go look for what?
Evidence.
Evidence. Great, so next step is finding evidence to support the claims that we're making in both of these questions. Then we're outlining. Now, a few of us spent too much time in our outlines yesterday. I want you to understand that outlines need to be quick and swift. So for example, I'm gonna go back to home so I can type here. There we go. Oh, here we go. So when I'm outlining, guys, I don't want to be spending a ton of time writing out complete sentences and all of finding my evidence, underlining it in the text, then going back to my outline and writing it out, then drafting it out. That's too much. So for my first topic sentence, all I'm going to do is go back to my question, describe how the author structured their ideas in the text. Text 1 is structured with compare and contrast, and text 2, contrast, and text 2 in chronological order. Then my evidence 1 needs to be evidence to support why it's compare and contrast, right? All you need to do is underline, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write T1, And then I'm going to just start the first few words of my piece of evidence. In Japan, whatever it is. And then I'll just do dot, dot, dot. That is all I'm writing in my plan. I am not writing out the full piece of evidence. I am not writing out complete sentences. It's just a plan. It's not what's getting me credit. The credit is when I actually start to draft my ideas. So if we're ready for breakout rooms, we can go to breakout rooms. The goal is, the expectation is that you have both of these paragraphs drafted, planned and drafted by the end of this lesson. So we have, great, it's 9:27. That's awesome. We've got a lot of time. So that means we have about 20 minutes in your breakout rooms to work on these texts. So I'm ready whenever you are, Miss Mafia. If you're not ready, what?
They're open.
Okay, great. Okay, so in this room right now, what we're gonna do is this. We are going to make sure to, I'm going to put, let's do this. I am going to put on, since we have a lot of time to be able to do this, and that's great. I'm gonna put 4 minutes on my timer for us to finish our outlines, our plans. Chris, you're in this room. We'll just stay in the room unless, or you can leave the session, go back to the main session, Chris. Where it says leave breakout room, you'll go back to the main session, tell Miss Mafia you need to go to a different room. Okay, we're gonna put 4 minutes on the clock for you to find your evidence and outline. Then we're gonna share our outlines with the group. So 4 minutes on the clock, and then we're sharing outlines. Byron, find a spot to set it so you can write.